And again, thank you for being here, General Bolden. I'd like to ask you a question about the budget, of course. The former Space Shuttle Commander Eileen Collins was testifying before our committee probably less than, 3 weeks ago maybe, about the decision to cancel the Constellation program that was not made by NASA at all, but by the White House. She said, "I believe the program cancellation decisions that are made by bureaucracies behind closed doors and without input by the people are divisive, damaging," and she said cowardly, and many times more expensive in the long run. Similar complaints of White House meddling with NASA's programs, counter to NASA's own program managers, surround the Sophia telescope aircraft, the Orion crew vehicle, Space Launch System, and various Mars missions. The point here is that this White House ignores NASA's input, but then tells you and your associate administrators to defend their decisions before Congress. And as you mentioned a while ago, maybe it's not just all of his decisions. That's what we'd like to find out. Did the White House consult you about this idea to fund NASA through mandatory spending accounts?
No, sir, they did not, but we had extensive discussions after we saw the budget, and because I asked the question of what's the difference, and when I had my conversation, or at least passing words from between me and the OMB director, I was assured that our budget is $19 billion. And so if you ask me to define for you what the difference is between mandatory and discretionary, I'm going to take it for the record,
right?
Because my budget is $19 billion.
Okay, and then without this mandatory spending, it looks like the White House's proposed budget for NASA is about $1 billion less than Congress appropriated last year, which was $19.2 billion. The White House is wasting everyone's time with this mandatory spending proposal and trying to obfuscate that they're proposing to cut NASA's budget by $1 billion. A continuing resolution would be better than this request. And why are you advocating a cut to NASA?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not advocating a cut to NASA. We are advocating a $19 billion budget. And to be quite honest, the reason it wasn't 19.3 was because we had no idea that the 16 budget was going to be 19.3. We were, as I said before, we were all startled pleasantly to receive a $19.3 billion budget from the Congress. Had we had to pass our final numbers in prior to, had we had the benefit of knowing what the 16 budget was going to be, we would have asked for even more. But I was, as I said before, I am very happy with the $19 billion settlement that we came up with in our negotiations with the administration. And you know, I think there are many other things that had to be compensated for, and that's the reason that I think that they chose to use mandatory and discretionary. There are some things that we didn't count on last year, dealing with the census, dealing with some of our partners, for example, dealing with refugees. There are a lot of different issues that come up that come from the discretionary spending pool. And so, you know, the president has really tried to push research and development, technology development from the moment he became president. And this represented a way to do that. And I think if you look at what is in the mandatory section, it is mostly technology development, engineering type things, whether it's in human exploration or science or anywhere.
I understand. With a nearly $20 trillion national debt, and the biggest problem being mandatory spending side of spending, that's a tough nut to crack. And I'd like to ask you about SLS and Orion. In this year's budget request, the administration continues to play the game of back and forth with Congress on SLS and Orion funding, negatively impacting the schedule for getting American astronauts back into deep space exploration. NASA is formally committed to launch the first crewed mission of SLS and Orion, known as EM2, no later than 2023. The FY17 request funds this commitment. At the same time, NASA says that it is internally planning for an EM1 launch in 2021. Why doesn't NASA simply request funding for a 2021 launch date?
Mr. Chairman, the funds that we requested and came in the president's budget requests support our detailed estimate of how much it would cost and what the time would be to fly the first human mission in SLS and Orion, and that is 2023, utilizing a process that we call joint confidence level process, and it gives us a 70% confidence that our numbers are correct. So when we went through the formal process of evaluating based on what we assumed the budget might be, that's how we came up with the 2023 time. The Congress, when they appropriated more than was requested, that's the number that we use when we say we're working an internal number. You know, if the Congress decides that they want to plus SLS up every year, you would be on a path to an earlier launch. And the earlier launch, I don't know what that date would be, but it would be earlier than the president's budget request number.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to recognize the gentlewoman from Maryland, please.